One of the challenges when you are someone who tends to self-abandon is that you're so in tune to your environment, to others' energies, to the feelings of other people, and you take on this sense of responsibility to make sure everything is smooth, you're not ruffling any feathers, you're trying to keep everything calm and functioning, and yet there becomes this disconnect with yourself in the process, because you're diverting your resources and your energy outside yourself consistently. And through that process, there often becomes this invalidation of self, in that you may have a certain experience, you may be feeling something, and internally you question yourself, or you suppress those emotions, or you resist them. And then there becomes this inner turmoil and feeling that your needs are not being met, whether that's consciously or subconsciously. And I want to share this with you because I had an experience with someone I was working with. And in her experience, she was consistently having these thoughts that she had to worry about her environment. So she would have like a handyman come over, and she would have this image as if the handyman was going to attack her or going to steal from her. And she knew cognitively that there was no evidence of him ever doing this, and that this had never happened to her. She had never had this experience, but yet her mind kept replaying some of these fear-based scenarios of this actually happening. And what she would do time and time again was give herself that internal dialogue of, that's ridiculous. That's not true. Why are you thinking that? Why do you keep going to this place? Where is this even coming from? And so she would shut herself down every time she had this experience. But yet the next time she had a situation where somebody was in her house, she would again experience these same thoughts. And she would have this happen in other areas too. And as I was speaking with her, it was important for her to recognize the difference between her thoughts and her feelings. And so she was experiencing thoughts that didn't have a lot of evidence. They weren't necessarily true, and they were coming from the root of her fear-based experience. And the fear is the emotion that she's feeling. And your emotions are always valid. So it was really important for her to differentiate between her emotions and her thoughts, because our thoughts can be false. And in many cases, they are false. And things can pop in our heads that have no basis. But yet our emotions are always true. That is our valid, true experience that we're feeling. But the problem with this scenario is that this woman was invalidating herself. She was saying how ridiculous it was that these thoughts were coming through. And by invalidating the thoughts, she was also invalidating her emotions and trying to shove it down and not recognize what was actually going on in the surface. And so part of this is that recognizing that even though the thoughts are not true, that it's absolutely essential to validate your emotions and recognize that they do have truth. And for her, there was this truth in that she was fearful. She was experiencing a sense of fear, and to validate that in herself. And by her validating herself and allowing herself to feel seen and heard in that moment, she actually started to stop having some of those thoughts that occurred. And it was almost like her system was releasing some of those emotions, being able to allow herself to feel what was her truth in that moment. And so I want to share this story with you because it's so important when we go through these experiences and we have these thoughts to differentiate between the thoughts and the feelings. And while the thoughts may not be true, we can question the thoughts and say, is that true? What is this trying to tell me? But when we look at the emotions, you can dive a little bit deeper into what's behind the thoughts that you're having. What is the emotion that you're feeling? Tune into your body, the sensations within your body, and start recognizing the feeling that you're experiencing in this moment. That is where you want to validate that. That is where it's absolutely essential to give that truth, to recognize it, to see it, to feel it. Because when we don't and we resist that and we invalidate ourselves, we are only pushing it further down. And we are making ourselves feel unseen and unheard. It's almost like if you had a child and your child was saying, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this, and you're completely ignoring the child. And you did that over a course of a few days and over a course of a few years. Your child would build up this resentment of like, my mom or dad never listens to me. Why would I even show this anymore? I'm just going to keep it stuffed in. There's no point in telling them because they never even acknowledge it. It's the same thing for yourself. When you suppress those emotions, when you don't allow yourself to feel them, you are creating this sense of feeling unseen and unheard in yourself. And the thing about emotions, it's like having tennis balls in a pool. You can push them down underwater, push them down, but the more you push them down, the more they're going to want to come up to the surface and the more internal resistance you're going to have within yourself to try to hold them down over and over again. And you can think about every emotion that you suppress is just another tennis ball being added on. And that becomes a lot of effort to keep all those things under the surface, keep them suppressed, keep them down. And if you ever had a triggering moment or something that's happened where you can't really hold it together, a lot of times these emotions will erupt and they will come to the surface. And then it takes more effort to continually push them down, especially when they start to compile. And this is where we start to see some breakdown in the system. This is where we can feel that internal resistance. This is where our body can actually feel the impacts of these suppressed emotions. We can start to experience pain. Our immune systems get impacted. We feel the unrelenting stress and the impacts of that as we continually suppress those emotions. And so that's why it's so important that when you're experiencing something, it's important to validate your own experience and know that emotions are always true. Your feelings are there as information. And the quicker you can validate them, the quicker you feel seen and heard, the more you can move through those and not feel the pressure to hold everything in and hold it all down. So if you've ever experienced something in life where you have these thoughts and you think they're so outlandish and you're not even understanding where they're coming from, I want you to separate that. Separate, where's the emotion in this? What am I feeling versus what am I thinking? And validate whatever that feeling is for you. And in those feelings, explore that. Where is this coming from? What is the root? Did something happen in my past that now this is continually coming up? Are there patterns that I'm seeing in this? Do I know the source? And maybe you don't know the source, and that's okay too. But either way, it's important to validate those emotions, recognize them, and allow yourself the freedom to feel them. Now, if you have felt disconnected from yourself and you've tried to hold it all together for years and trying to make sure everybody else's things are okay and spreading yourself thin, this can be really hard to allow yourself the freedom to actually feel those emotions. And that is where that creating that sense of safety within yourself, within your nervous system, will allow you to experience the emotions even more. Often when you've suppressed emotions or you've held them under the surface, they arise when your system feels safe enough to feel them and express them. And so some ways we can create safety within our body is just by working on some deep breathing. So breathing and teaching our system that we're not in a sympathetic or fight, flight, freeze, fawn response allows our system to feel calmer, allows our system to feel more regulated, and creates a sense of safety. So one technique I always love to teach is a physiological sigh. So this is where you inhale through your nose for a count of 6. Take another little sip in and slowly exhale through your mouth or your nose for a count of 8. And then you can repeat that several times and you'll start to feel a shift in your body where you feel like some of that tension is melting away. You feel a little bit more of a release. You're not holding on to things quite as much. And as you start to shift into that more parasympathetic system response, that's when you'll start to feel a little bit more sense of safety, and it'll be a little bit easier to actually express those emotions, to feel those emotions, to sense a little bit more clarity around those emotions. So I wanted to share that story with you of someone I worked with who consistently invalidated herself, because maybe that's you. I know that was me for much of my life. Invalidating myself, had a lot of self-doubt, didn't allow myself to feel what I was feeling within myself. and didn't allow my authentic self to be heard and seen, and really just kind of shut myself down in order to function and take care of other things outside myself. And it does take a toll over time when you consistently do that. So I want this to be a little bit of a nudge for you to start recognizing some of your feelings, some of your emotions, and validate yourself. When we validate ourselves internally, we don't need it externally as much, and we don't seek it out. We don't need somebody to tell us what our experience is because we have a deep knowing of what our experience is. We know our truth. We don't need someone to say that it's okay to feel what we're feeling because we can give that permission to ourselves. And that is one of the biggest gifts that we can give ourselves by allowing ourselves to feel safe in expressing, feeling our emotions. And that all comes from validating it. When you validate it, you teach yourself that you are safe to feel it, express it, and go through those emotions. And now you don't have to carry that baggage. You don't have to keep all those tennis balls underwater. The pressure's off. You can allow yourself to feel it, move through it, and move on with your life. I hope this helps.